Hello, welcome to Train Signal. This is the introduction to the System Center Configuration Manager 2012 console lesson in the System Center 2012 Configuration Manager training course. The console is new and improved. If you're used to the System Center Configuration Manager 2007 console, throw out everything you know. It's totally revamped from the ground up. We're going to start by discussing this fact that it's new and improved, and then we're going to look at the console as a whole. You're also going to get a look at role-based access security, a new access security method that's available in Configuration Manager 2012 that's much improved over access security methods available in older versions of Configuration Manager. You'll also begin to understand roles and scopes as they pertain to the console and your use of Configuration Manager, and you'll learn how to create security roles and scopes before we move forward with other post-installation tasks later on in this course. You're going to learn quite a lot in this lesson, including that the Configuration Manager console is brand new, how it works, where to go for primary actions in the console, like where you need to go to do major tasks, and how to restrict access to individual System Center Configuration Manager features. With Configuration Manager 2012, it's easier than ever to lock administrators into specific functionality so they can't do wide, huge tasks that could have system-wide implications. But you can allow them to do very granular, minuscule, or small tasks to make it easier to distribute workloads. The business goals in this lesson are to ensure that the IT staff have the knowledge that's necessary to meet their responsibilities. Obviously, the console is going to be the primary point of administration with Configuration Manager. Therefore, making sure that IT staff know how to use the console is pretty critical. It's also critical for the organization to maintain appropriate risk management policies. This is where role-based access control and some of Configuration Manager's security features come into play. IT organizations have a critical function to the organization to ensure the security of information assets and services. Have I mentioned that the console is brand new yet? Well, it is. The reason it's brand new is because Microsoft previously had a whole bunch of products that they had called System Center this and that. Each one was still a separate product even though they shared the System Center moniker. Now, however, all of the products have been wrapped into a single bundle called System Center 2012, and every product has a consistent administrative experience across the product line. It's totally revamped from the ground up. The console that you're used to using is gone. Finished. Fine. Terminated. Gone. Did I mention that? It's very improved. Very much improved. Its reactive and proactive console elements are far and above what they used to be in Configuration Manager of old. You have at-a-glance task and process status, so you know exactly where things stand. That used to be somewhat frustrating in the console, but it's a little bit easier these days. And you have one-stop shopping for alerts, and you'll see all of this in this course. The console also no longer relies on the Microsoft Management Console. It's a custom-purpose built console just for Configuration Manager and the System Center line. It has an Outlook-style interface with what Microsoft calls wonder bars or major areas of administration. You'll see those here in a little bit. If you're used to Outlook, this console is going to look very familiar. And the ribbon has really permeated a number of Microsoft products in recent years. System Center 2012 Configuration Manager is the latest product to get the ribbon interface with context-aware ribbons at the top of just about every administration page that you're going to see in Configuration Manager 2012. The ribbon provides you with shortcuts to accessible features in a context-sensitive way. And as I mentioned, the System Center Configuration Manager console now has very deep granular access and security. This is good. This allows you to really get a little bit more custom with who can do work in Configuration Manager. From the high level, the new console really focuses on the user. Microsoft is really making sure that their products these days are more user-centric than necessarily IT-centric as they used to be in the past. After all, the users and the applications are what are getting the work done in the organization. So a focus on the user really starts to make sense when you think about it in that context. And the console really focuses on the user in this way. In fact, when you start thinking about role-based access control, which we'll discuss soon, that's really another focus on the user. There are a number of console components, including wonder bars, a navigation area, the context-aware ribbon, and the results pane. And we're going to go over and take a look at those in just a couple of seconds in the Configuration Manager console. And we're back over here on our Configuration Manager 2012 system. And I'll start the console by going to Start, All Programs, Microsoft System Center 2012, Configuration Manager Console. Now this will also put it on the shortcut, on the Start menu as a shortcut automatically once it's run a couple times. But I wanted you to see exactly where you go to get the console. Later in this course, we won't be doing it quite that deeply. We'll just go straight to the console. It's connected to the site database, and then voila, we've got our System Center Configuration Manager console. And you notice we're connected to our site, GM1, and we're in evaluation mode. Now, I mentioned there were 4 primary console components: Wonderbars, Navigation, the ribbon, and the results pane, which is over here. This huge area is really where a lot of the work gets done. The Wonderbars are really the major administration areas that are going to be available to you in Configuration Manager 2012. And right now we have the Assets and Compliance area selected. The navigation area immediately above this Outlook style interface down here is sensitive to the fact that we have Assets and Compliance selected. If I select Administration, the navigation items will change based on what we have selected. So the navigation area is also context sensitive. And so if you've got Administration selected, we're going to end up with administration focused tasks. Notice right above there we also have a breadcrumb type browser interface bar. This tells you exactly where you are so that you can easily go back and forth to different screens. That's kind of nice. We also have back and forward buttons. So if I click back now, I go back to the overview screen. If I click forward, I go back to the administration screen. Configuration Manager tracks your movement to make it easier for you to perform repetitive administrative tasks. That's kind of nice. And I also mentioned the ribbon. This is a context-sensitive ribbon. So if I change areas, we're going to see that the ribbon changes. When I select distribution points, I end up with items that are applicable to distribution points, not to client settings, for example. So when I choose client settings, the ribbon changes so that I see client settings focused areas. And there's a pattern developing here that you can probably see. The ribbon is very context sensitive and makes it easy to access tools that you need right at your fingertips. And let me go, actually that's where I'm going to stay. Over here in the results pane is what the results of all this are. When I've got a particular administration area selected and a navigation item, I end up with something to happen over here in the results pane. And you can see that I can double click things over here in the results pane and get more information, but this is really where a lot of the work that happens in Configuration Manager is going to take place. So that is a high level view of what we've got in the Configuration Manager console. And you can see when you first log in, you get a primary overview page that's Assets and Compliance, but we'll be taking a look at much more as we go through this course. Here's a feature I like: role-based access security. This is relatively new. This is new in System Center Configuration Manager 2012. And it means that primary sites are no longer security boundaries. There was a day when, in order to be highly secure, you had to deploy Configuration Manager sites that were security boundaries. Now, as you can imagine, this meant a complex melding of the deployment or the planning tasks along with the ongoing administration tasks, and may have made it very difficult and inflexible to change the administrative model once Configuration Manager was fully deployed. Now, that's gone. Primary sites are no longer security boundaries. And you may understand in Configuration Manager 2012 that there's less need for separate sites than there used to be in the past. This is one of the reasons, because Microsoft has taken the idea of role-based access security to a whole new level in Configuration Manager 2012. Role-based access security hides interface elements based on a user profile, and it shows only what is relevant to the current user. So if you're not allowed to do software deployment, you don't see software deployment. This is the way things should be. Users and administrators in particular should see those functions to which they have access, but not be able to see other things in an attempt to mess around and get around the system. Or just to be inefficient. It's not like anybody's doing anything nefarious, but why display things they can't even do? This provides granular control over actions. Configuration Manager 2012 ships with 14 predefined security roles. This initial installation adds the administrator account to the full administrator's role. And as the name implies, the full administrator is a full administrator. It can do anything and everything with Configuration Manager 2012. It's a good thing that the first administrator account is a member of full administrators. Otherwise, it'd be very difficult to delegate access since no one would have full administrative privileges. But since there's an account there, access delegation can take place. Roles and scopes are somewhat new to Configuration Manager 2012. But what are they? A role defines what a user can do. A scope defines what objects a user can manipulate. And when you combine them, it's what a user can do with specific objects in System Center Configuration Manager 2012. Roles include things such as full administrator or endpoint administrator. Scopes can be security scopes or collections. Now, if these don't quite make sense yet, don't worry, because we're going to be doing a demonstration here in just a couple of minutes that's going to really, I think, clarify things for you a little bit. Before we go over for a demonstration, let's take one quick peek at one more topic. Creating security roles and scopes. Once we go through this, we'll go over and start doing some demonstrations. First of all, you can create your own security roles. And the way you do this is you start with an existing security role that exists in Configuration Manager, copy the role, and then simply make desired changes to the role permissions. And then at the end, you get a new security role. You can also change an object's security scope. A security scope can be changed after the object is created. Now, you could set a security scope on a particular object, and the reason you do this is so that you can say what people are allowed to access this particular object. And again, let's go over and take a look at this in action, because I think it'll make more sense then. But an object can have more than one security scope so that different people can manipulate an object in different ways. So you may have a group of administrators that's allowed to manipulate an object, while another group of administrators is only allowed to view an object. By having different security scopes and different security roles, the combinations of these can get very granular so that you can have just those that should have permissions to something in a certain way be able to perform specific functions. And with that, let's go over to the Configuration Manager system and play around a little bit with security roles and scopes. And here we are, back over at the Configuration Manager system, and all this stuff is going to happen in the administration area. And you're going to see here that we have a security area in the navigations pane here. And we have security roles, and we have security scopes. And you can see that there's already a couple of scopes, all. This includes everything. So basically all securable objects are members of the all group, and this is basically one that's a default that you can't get rid of. This allows the full administrator to be able to access everything in the system. And you can see that there's a description down here. Then you have the default. This is another default security scope that you can't change. However, we're going to see how you can manipulate security scopes and roles here in just a second. Let's go back to roles for a minute. You notice there are a number of different roles here. We have application administrator, application author, compliance settings administrator or manager. There's endpoint protection manager. These are people who can manage endpoint protection on a client. Then we have full administrator, all kinds of items that we have here. And if you right-click any of these and choose properties, you can get some information about the particular role. First of all, you can get the role name, and you get a description. And right now, this says grants all permissions in Configuration Manager. This is what we want. The administrative user that's assigned to this role is the administrator account. And you'll notice the assigned scopes is all. Remember I said before that we have this all scope, and this is basically saying that the administrator account has access to all scopes and can perform these particular functions. So this security role defines what this user can do. The administrator user can do this to this, all scopes. And as you can see, there's all kinds of different permissions here, and you can open them up to get more information about what this user can and cannot do. But here you're going to see that everything is pretty much a yes. So when it comes to alerts, the administrator account can create, delete, modify, read, whatever. You can do reporting, the whole 9 yards with every object in the system, and that's good. The best way to demonstrate this is to go ahead and simply create a new security group, or basically a set of permissions that's going to allow users to perform just one singular task. As an example, let's add a new administrative user that's allowed to simply read only particular objects, certain objects. So we're going to first of all start by creating a new security scope. Let's say the security scope that we want to limit this user to has to do with distribution points. So we'll call the security scope name DP1, just for simplicity. We'll then go down to distribution points, and if I right-click distribution points, if I right-click the distribution point, I'll do set security scope. Let me go back to that so you can see it. Set security scopes, and I'm going to add DP1 as a security scope. And it's okay if an object exists in multiple security scopes. That's going to be common in larger organizations. I'm now going to go to administrative users. I'm going to right-click administrative users and choose add user or group. I'm going to add a user named Adam Savage. And click assigned security roles, and we're going to do read-only analyst. But notice down here we have assigned security scopes and collections. And if I wanted to, I could just allow the security role to take care of all the permissions, but I actually want to limit it more. So I'm going to remove all of these, and I'm going to add our new DP1 security scope, and that's it. So I'm adding a user named A Savage, who is a read-only analyst, who is allowed only to manage the instances of objects that are assigned to the specific security scope or collection. And click OK. I want to point one thing out. If I go to security roles and I choose read-only analyst and I look at the details, you're going to see that the permissions on here are pretty significant. This user can read a lot of different kinds of objects. Okay, so I should be able to get the details about all of the collections that are available, all of the boundaries, all of the various discovery methods. No, they're not here. But basically a lot of different kinds of details that we have available to us in Configuration Manager. All the distribution points, which is what we're going to see here soon. But I want you to notice that this user can read collections. This role can read collections. And there are a couple of default collections created by default. If I go up to Assets and Compliance, you'll see that there are a few collections, user collections and device collections, that are available by default in a clean Configuration Manager installation. But our user won't see them. I want to start a second instance of the Configuration Manager console, and this time I'm going to run it as that A Savage user. Now, you might be wondering, why can I see all this stuff? Well, I can't. If I go to user collections, I don't see any collections. If I go to device collections, I don't see any collections there either. If, however, I go to distribution points, I will see an item. There it is. If I right-click that, I can't even open its properties page. I am a read-only administrator. I can't make any changes to any objects in Configuration Manager. And the only reason that I can see other things, such as the Assets and Compliance area at all, is because I haven't been very granular with my security role itself. I could create a more restricted read-only analyst role that only has access to the distribution points rather than be able to see everything else. So the fact that the security role itself can still see certain elements of the environment means you're going to see them on the screen. But you'll notice that this permission setting did effectively limit my ability with Adam Savage's account to be able to do anything in Configuration Manager except look at the details of a distribution point. So it worked. As you notice, we have a new and improved console in Configuration Manager 2012, and you got introduced to that console in this lesson. You learned about role-based access security, roles and scopes, and you got to see the effect of what happens when you create a combination of a security role and scope and a new user in Configuration Manager 2012. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.